Hello and welcome once again. My name is Malcolm Simei. You're welcome now to this edition of The Link. This is The Link, and this evening we have a special guest, by the way, a Ugandan, one of the CEOs known globally for working for a very prominent farm called Diageo. Now, Diageo produces drinks that are produced under the name of the brand Uganda Breweries. I'll not go deep into that because I'll be going into advertising, but he's our very own BAKER Magenta, who is the head of Guinness Nigeria. But he will be the guest, the keynote speaker at this year's CEO Forum, which is tomorrow. You're very welcome, Mr. BAKER Magenta.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. You have just been replaced. You were the man at Uganda. You worked at Uganda Breweries as managing director.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
I think before Mark Ochiti and others. There was another gentleman, I think, from Zimbabwe or
yeah, from South Africa.
Exactly, from South Africa. And Japheth Kato, Mr. Japheth Kato was talking about you as a very professional man. That was at the induction of Alvin Bugua, the current managing director, Uganda Breweries. So he spoke very, very good things about you.
Nice to hear that.
And we were all surprised. Hey, Ugandan heading Guinness Nigeria and Diageo at that. You are welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great. So we are talking about the CEO Forum, and we will be discussing questions around his keynote speech, which will be centered around the myth in the business world, the myth and truth. So, Mr. BAKER Magenta, let's first take us through why did you choose to give a speech around the myth truth about in business?
Thank you very much. So, really excited to be back home. Every time there is an opportunity to come home, it's fantastic. So, the theme for this year for the CEO Forum was how businesses in East Africa can lead the 21st century. So, we looked at what is that one thing that you need to master for you to become a leader in business in the 21st century. And clearly, for you to be able to be a master in your field as a business leader, as a business company, you need to understand what is going on around you. And there are three things really that happen at any given time. One is there will be trends which you need to understand and adapt to the trends. There will be disruption, which you also need to understand. It's different from a trend. But I think the most important one is a discontinuity. When there's a discontinuity in the business environment or the model, that has to be a significant impact that you need to deal with as a business leader. So I thought, since East African businesses are looking to challenge as leading businesses in the 21st century, that's the current conversation happening at the moment. Do you really truly understand what the next phase of consumers, how the next phase of cities are going to look like, the impact on socio-political environment in which you operate, the whole challenge of age. There's an angry lot of young people across the world who have given rise to nationalism, populist leaders. You have to contend with that because the way they express themselves with the brands that you sell to them is different. They walk away. They're looking for insurgents. They're looking for small startups. So you see, as an established business, you always have to be very careful. Their rebellion in the business world is expressed by not buying from you. So I think I'm looking forward to the conversation tomorrow, and yeah, really excited to be here.
So you're talking like a real marketer, when you speak about brands. You are a man who sells brands.
Yes.
And the very large economy that you operate in, which is Nigeria, you sell in cities, Lagos, Abuja, etc. And speaking of large economies, Nigeria, Africa's largest economy, Nigeria and South Africa, we won't go into the rebasing, etc. But how are such economies, or even an economy like ours, or businesses in those economies surviving when the tide becomes tough or in turbulent economic times?
So I think there are a couple of things here. Economies tend to be clustered in 4 clusters in Africa. Let me talk about Africa. There is a group of economies one will call the diversified economies, like South Africa, Egypt. Then there are those which are oil exporting economies like Nigeria, Angola. Then there are those economies that are on transition, like Uganda, Kenya, Ghana, Senegal. And then there are those that are not even started transiting yet, like Southern Sudan. Coming back to the two big economies, yes, Nigeria is a big economy, but most of the revenue comes from oil exports. And you know what happened to oil and the oil prices. So between 2014 and now, the economy in Nigeria has struggled. For 3 years, it went into recession. It's back into growth, but it's still growing below the population increase. So really, people are still getting poorer. In South Africa, I think that has been really driven more by the politics and how that has been managed. It's less really about the economy being diversified and so on. But South Africa, I think, is struggling from economic transition and what has been going on with that. Same thing you see in Egypt. The uprisings that happened in Egypt and Morocco. All of those have affected some of those economies. The outcome of that, however, is good news for East Africa in a way. That when you look at the growth on the East Coast versus West Coast, all the economies on the East Coast are growing at twice the rate the economies on the West are growing.
Sure.
So I think it's a topic that is appropriate. We are right at the right place at the moment. Our economies are growing, the population is growing, it is young. So as leaders of business, I think we need now to think, how do we take this forward in the 21st century?
You speak about large economies with a ballooning youth population.
Yeah.
And companies that are coming up, governments are struggling. For instance, the government of Uganda is trying to make sure that it creates jobs, opening up industries. I see the president all over the country, moving here and there, opening factories, opening industries, no matter who owns these. But the key objective is make sure that they create jobs, for this ballooning youth population. But then again, on the other hand, companies are cutting back just to remain, to survive and to stay afloat. Yeah. And cutting back means cutting jobs. I don't know whether you have seen that in your own companies that you work for because of automation, etc.
Absolutely.
So then you bring about this conversation with the youth who you're talking about. And I don't know, is cutting back on jobs or job cuts the way to survive turbulence, and what happens now to this youthful population that we're talking about?
There are many questions in that one question,
yes,
but I'll just try and answer the few. One is absolutely the single biggest need for Africa at the moment is creating jobs and get people into employment. The reasons are clear, social stability, political stability, economic sustainability. So create good jobs, let people be in jobs, number one. Number two is get infrastructure so that people can move around and get connected as communities. There are lots of people moving out of the countryside into the cities. So the pressure on infrastructure and social service is going to become real big. And that's a dilemma for politics and leaders of communities. Because when these people come into the cities, for the first time they confront wealth. And what triggers the sense of unhappiness or unease is the sense of inequality. It's less about being poor, but the sense of this is not fair, it's not equitable. So by keeping people in jobs, then that doesn't arise. I think the third thing, yes, cutting jobs is one of the things you could do when things are tough, but it's not sustainable. It's a short-term thing like, tighten your belt, get over a bad period, but you have to invest and go back into growth and create those jobs you need. So it's a short-term measure. It's not something that I would recommend as you do every time, but there are times when you just have to do it and resize the business, be able to overcome that wave and then go back into investment. Long-term, my recommendation will always be invest when times are tough, because you don't know when the good times are going to come. And when the good times come back, it is those who were prepared when things are tough that really benefit from the bloom. So it is going against the intuition, which would be saying to you, size back, hold on, hang in there, see how the economy goes. It's actually the best time for you to innovate and invest behind.
Very interesting discussion you said to have. And let's talk about going digital. The transformative power of technology is here and is not going anywhere. Governments are they're taking some sort of wait and see approach, but then again saying no, this is too good to let go. And then you have a private sector that seems to be a step ahead with the digital revolution, the fourth industrial revolution. So how much of that is how important is the fourth industrial revolution, the digital revolution, Someone wanted me to ask it this way: is it a myth of how much of it is a myth or fact in in the business world?
It's a fact that it's the second biggest disruption or discontinuity in the business world, in the social politics at the moment is technology. How does it impact us? In many ways. So two things are playing out at the same time: urbanization and technology. So what is happening is that people are moving out of the countryside into the cities, so they're learning to live differently, and digital is also coming. So three things are happening: they're communicating differently, they're living differently, they're socializing differently. For a business, you need to understand the impact of that is how consumers are now coming to know about your brands and interact with them. Number two, how products get created and how they get moved around. Number three is the value proposition of your products and how those gets assessed against other products. And the final thing is the idea of space. Years ago, young people had to walk out of home to go and socialize in some place. Now they don't have to do that. They can almost be entertained at home. How do you reach them? So it's products, getting to those people in spaces which are different. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the the myth that businesses sort of fixate, if you may, or put in place, to survive, in order not to to sort of disappear, go away, or even close.
Yeah. So there are things you need to care about when you see there is something that is going to be disruptive or create a discontinuity in one or more of the things that matter. One is, does it affect my product? Does it affect the people I serve? Does it challenge my business model? Does it challenge how I make money? So the myths that you need to worry about, the ones in Africa, which I think we shall be discussing a lot more. One is, consumerism in Africa is not individual. So for the people who have got money, actually, they don't spend all of that money on themselves. Number two is that income in Africa is difficult to read. So every time you hear people bucket, people in socio-economic groups, you have to be careful. I think the third thing is that consumers in Africa are going to be westernized. It's going to be a long time before that happens, because actually what is happening is the Afropolitans, who are the new young people who have grown up in the cities, they've not grown up into tribes and villages, the millennials, but in Africa called Afropolitans. The way they are relating to brands is reinterpret those brands into the African culture, but not westernizing really. And the fourth and final one really is that there's a myth about the people in formal employment, the people we call the corporates or the professionals, are the people who are going to drive consumption in Africa. It's not true. There are very few. Their spending power is very small. It's the people who are in the informal sector who are going to drive this. Okay. So if you understand those four, then you're in a good place.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baker Magenta, the head of Guinness Nigeria and former managing director, Uganda Breweries. I know colleagues at Uganda Breweries have been watching, and thank you very much to the current managing director. I don't want to take it away from him. Is Alvin Bugu.
I'm so excited.
Very welcome. Also formerly at Uganda Breweries. We'll be waiting to hear from you and watch you excitingly at the CEO Forum tomorrow. Thank you very much, and that's the link.
Thank you.